Okay, I want to introduce my guests. It's the first time that I've done an interview on this channel, and my guest tonight, we are very honored to have, is Yana and Stephen Danoon. I hope I said that correct, from Israeli News Live.
Yes.
You did say it correct. It's Benun, but
Danoon,
Benun,
Danoon was the name I write in.
yeah,
But it's okay. I'm known by both names. Even people that know my real name, they always call me Stephen Danoon anyway, so I'm
yeah.
used to it.
Okay. Well, I guess first of all, we'd like to know who we're talking with this evening. And if you guys could give an introduction, it doesn't matter together, individually, like as a joint introduction. Um, and also why you think this interview is important for my viewers to hear.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So he wants me to start, so I guess I will. We are Denun Institute of Biblical Research and Israeli News Live. And the reason we have the name Israeli News Live is uh, we lived in Israel at the time when we founded Israeli News Live. So we were giving news out of Israel live, but we actually moved back to Europe after a while when we were starting to awaken from Zionist theology. And eventually we came back to United States. So we just kept the name Israeli News Live because that's how people knew us already. So we didn't want to kind of change the name. But we have a ministry where our mission is to wake up the Christians who are in dispensational uh, worldview, dispensational theology, which is
Yeah.
majority, I would say,
Yeah.
99% of Christians in United States are dispensationalists in one way or another. And they have a very Zionistic view of Christianity with a support for the state of Israel. They base it mainly, the main text would be Genesis 12:3. Bless those, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And so we have done major research into dispensationalism and into politics, geopolitics of Zionism, and found it to be an extremely dangerous system that will eventually be used in the last days to enforce Noahide laws worldwide. So we're trying to teach people what Noahide laws are, what are the dangers of Noahide laws, why we absolutely have to uh, refuse them. We have to understand what they are. We have to refuse them 100%, never accept them. And so basically that's kind of like a first introduction, I would say. So go ahead, Steve. Do you have anything to
I
add?
thought you did perfect.
Good, yes.
Yes.
I
I'm
remember what.
to do some caffeine here because I get in the evening, I get super tired. So I'm waiting for it to kind of kick in a little bit.
It's
So
because he gets up at 4 a.m. with the
I'm up at
roosters.
five.
the roosters
I'm
don't
up
even
at
get up
five
as early as
usually.
that.
Yeah. I like to get up early as well. Yeah. I remember watching you guys about, I think it was, I want to say 8 years ago, but I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe seven. And you guys, I think it was before you moved to Florida.
Okay.
And it was the first time that I heard you talk about the Noahide laws. And then I went over the years, I went and researched more on it. And also the Khazars and just the Talmud. And so I will hand it over to you guys to present um, your presentation on it because you can do a lot better job than I can.
I do think on that you need to do the opening on that for sure.
Okay. So seven Noahide laws are really not seven Noahide laws, but they're presented to people as seven Noahide laws, mostly by Chabad organization. And why they're dangerous is not because they sound bad. They're certainly not bad sounding laws. And when you mention them, you would probably say, as a Christian, if you don't know any better or don't know anything about the subject, you would say, what's wrong with that? I mean, we as Christians believe in all of these things. So let's name them. Okay. So, very first law, as it is in Talmud, right, would be establish the courts of justice. That's in a Talmud, that's a very first law of 7 Noahide laws. Establish the courts of justice. And then he goes into laws like no idolatry, no blasphemy, no theft, no sexual immorality, no murder. And then the last law would be do not eat a limb from a living animal. Okay. So when you go through these laws like this, when you hear them for the first time, you say, well, I mean, what's wrong with them? Nothing, right? I mean, we as Christians, we
Right.
don't believe in idolatry. We don't believe in blaspheming the name of God. We don't believe in murder and so on, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they sound innocent and they are making them universal morality laws. And I will explain later why they're dangerous, why I think that this is not just like a Judaic doctrine that they teach in some synagogue, right? But
Mm-hmm.
why am I worried about it? Why do I even care? The problem are actually sub-laws. Every single law has several sub-laws until we have about 90 to 100 sub-laws. And a problem is also who has the power of interpretation, because every law needs to be interpreted by someone. What does this law mean? I mean,
Right.
when you have a law of idolatry, for no idolatry, for example, idolatry in Christianity has a different definition than in idolatry in Judaism. So who is over that law? Is it the Christian pastors or ministers, or is it the rabbis? Well, the authority to interpret Noahide laws was given officially to the rabbis, rabbinic courts, Sanhedrin, and the official rabbis of the Sanhedrin. And these laws come actually from their sacred writings. They're not named in the Old Testament. Everybody knows that in Old Testament we have 10 commandments. That's how we know it, right?
Correct. Yes.
You don't know about 7 Noahide laws. So they come from the Talmud and they're mentioned in the Talmud. And then later they were codified by Rambam. And Rambam is like a 12th century rabbinic scholar that has a very high position within rabbinic Judaism. And he was a codifier of their official law. We call that law in Hebrew halakha. That's the Hebrew term for it. And the Noahide law became part of the Jewish law and was codified by Rambam. So Rambam is a respected authority. This is who they refer to. Okay. So it's just like
Okay.
a Bible for them.
Right.
So
Okay.
this particular power in interpretation went to the rabbis. And now they are proclaiming that the entire world needs to be under the Noahide law to preserve the world from chaos, from problems, and to install peace and security. And you hear, well, I mean, they're talking these words. It's in the name of peace and security. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
why are we so worried about them? Because the main people who proselyte for Noahide laws are it's a kind of like a cultish group. Its name is Chabad organization, and they are worldwide in 100 countries, and they entered the governments of the world, and so they are also in American government. They have contacts with politicians, senators, congressmen, various organizations and corporations worldwide, even religious institutions. And I hate to say it, but even with official Christian institutions, and mainly dispensationalists. And they have even made their way into Catholic Church. You hear me well. Catholic Church has signed on to the Noahide laws. Catholic Church changed their official anti-Zionist or anti-Jewish doctrine in the year of 1965 with a document called Nostre Aetate. This is where they redefine what Catholicism teaches, and they basically apologize to Jews for all the past of persecutions. And they said that Jews now are the chosen people of God. They are the light of the world, and we need to view them as having a covenant that is still valid, and they have a covenant with God that's still valid, and it's kind of like parallel covenant with the Christians. So this is the official Catholic doctrine, and Catholics have been sending their priests and the bishops to Israel, to Jerusalem, to be specifically trained in the Noahide laws. So they're planning to distribute it as a future
Global agenda.
or
Yeah.
ethical values for the world, for the entire world, for the governments of the world.
Wasn't
So,
there like 1,000 pastors or something to
yes,
that went from the States to train in Israel or take their
yes,
Noahide law training?
Right. I think that more so that they were being re-indoctrinated because
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
they probably felt like that because there was so much backlash in America and the protests that were going on. I'm sure that Netanyahu felt like that they had fallen down on their jobs, that they weren't really making sure that Christians were supporting the Zionist agenda. And so they ended up bringing 1,000 ministers to Israel to re-push them, re-indoctrinate them. We know this because one of those ministers, one of his parishioners, actually reached out to us for help because of the fact of their reindoctrination and that pressure being put on them, and they're going after their flocks. They have people within the church, so no doubt they came back, they re-educated their own staff members and stuff, and they're looking for people that have left the church that they may be attending and try to reach those people and then deprogram them from the stance that they're beginning to take against the genocide that Netanyahu is doing in Gaza.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
so that's an interesting take that we're seeing from our end, and I think it's a very serious issue when Israel is not only involved in all of our politics, but now they're also involved in all the churches that they can get involved in, and they're controlling the narrative from every angle.
yes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, when I was talking about Noahide laws, Miss Betty, I wanted to tell you, I never got to the point because I start talking and forget what my point was. But why are the sub-laws so dangerous is because, as I mentioned, like let's pick one law like idolatry, right? No idolatry. So
Mhm.
I said that Christians would give a different definition to idolatry than Judaism does. So under Judaic halakha, uh, worship of Jesus Christ is considered idolatry, okay? Punishable by death, by decapitation. And any violation of any of the Noahide laws is punishable under Noahide laws by death, by decapitation. And it is actually written in a Talmud. It's written in a Law of Kings by Rambam. So it is in their code of law. When if Judaics ever have if we give them a chance to take over the world, they don't have any other way for non-Jews. There is only one way, and it's to go under the laws. So if you see in Jerusalem that they have succeeded to the point of building a temple, when they have a temple,
Oh, that won't be good at all.
it's going to be an official sign for everybody to know this is it. I mean, it's just that's when United Nations is going to be officially removed and transferred to Jerusalem. Sanhedrin, that it's already formed. They have formed Sanhedrin in early 2000s. I don't know if it was 2002 or 2004, but very early on in Tiberias, they met and created a Sanhedrin. And it's been there since then for decades, and it's growing in power. And they are now in contact with Noahide Academy in Jerusalem that actually trains Noahide judges and Noahide teachers. So in the background, they're preparing the whole infrastructure for these Noahide laws to become global laws, okay, and function on the halakha. So what will happen when you see the temple? This is a sign that we have given power to the beast, that Christians have, under the wrong dispensational doctrines, completely lost understanding of what kingdom of God truly is, because I believe that we Christians have the power to stop this.
Well,
I don't think this has to happen. That's my just personal conjecture. I
it
believe
might,
that we have the power to stop this.
I don't understand where, I do understand where the confusion lies, but I don't understand why more people cannot see that a lot of people really don't understand any of this. People are confused about, they think there's just one race of Jews or one type of Jew. They think that that Israel is a good thing. If you say anything against it, that
Mhm.
you're shunned for it. There's all this anti-Semitism laws everywhere. Um, a lot of people don't look enough into subjects or even lift their head up from their phones to realize what's going on, and this needs to be exposed. And I believe a lot of their deception comes from Darby Schofield Bible. Um, you know,
You just named it. You named
yeah.
it. That's it. It's a Schofield and Darby. And it does have actually earlier roots. There is a man online by name Jeremy Sladen, and he exposed the earlier roots even before Darby. What happened? So he's a very good person to look at there, his research. But I would say mainly it's Darby and Schofield that entered United States.
Yeah.
Darby was an Englishman, and he came here for conferences, and then Schofield took it over, and they have made this a main theology for Christians of United States, and they put the Schofield theology into theological seminaries, and they started educating this new generation of pastors and ministers with the Schofield dispensationalism. And until then, Christianity didn't look that way. That's not how they interpreted the Word of God. So
No.
they completely changed interpretations, and they inserted Jewish people to the center of prophecy, and an enormous amount of fulfilled prophecies they have put into the future. One thing I can tell you that Steve actually deals with concrete prophecies on his Substack, like Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Zechariah, Daniel. All of these prophecies that are very pertinent to dispensationalists, and how these, Christians were taught to put everything in the future. So he's explaining when it was actually fulfilled in a scripture. And if you put the prophecies to the correct timeline, dispensational theology completely falls apart. It makes no sense, right?
Yes. Yes.
So,
I
yeah,
think
go
one
ahead.
thing, too, Becky, to what you were saying, that a lot of people, they feel like, well, if you say anything about Israel, and they don't under, you mentioned kind of like they don't understand the differences.
Hmm.
I think that's a very good point to bring up as well, because most secular Jews here in America are not as supportive of the state of Israel as people think they are. The main support in America for Israel comes from the evangelical pro-Zionist group that have really taken the belief and the fundamental foundation of Schofield's teachings on this.
Hmm.
And this is why you see so many Jewish people that are outspoken about and actually and join into the protest against Israel and what they're doing to the Palestinians in Gaza or the West
Yes.
Bank for that matter. And so when it comes to, and even Orthodox Jews here in America, there's a lot of Orthodox Jews, especially in New York, that are very anti-Zionist. This is another reason why Carrie Carrie Prejean Bowler, the way she spoke, and she wanted to bring in a whole panel of guests that were against the Zionist ideology that's being pushed in the Trump administration. But because his whole administration is so pro-Zionist, I guess they didn't anticipate that Kerry may not be a pro-Zionist influencer there. And she tried
Yes.
to bring on Miko Peled, which we've interviewed Miko Peled before, another Israeli that was who's been very outspoken about the crimes that have happened. And and he had a family member that was killed by a suicide bomber back during the Intifada. But they realized I think it was his own mother that a
Sister.
sister
His own
said,
sister's daughter was killed by
yeah,
Arab or Palestinian person, but she realized why Palestinians were doing the intifada, and she was mature enough to understand that it was actually the government of the state of Israel that killed her daughter.
yes,
Why? Because they have stolen the land from the original
yeah, well,
Palestinians.
exactly. It'd be like, for example, all right, we moved here to the state of Texas. If suddenly someone just came in here and drove everybody out of the state of Texas, took your land, took your houses. Like, let's say you just built a house and you're enjoying your home, and suddenly you're thrown out of your house. And someone else moves into your house.
And they tell you
Uh,
that it belongs to us because God said so.
right,
Mm-mm.
because this is what has
Mm-mm.
happened in Israel. And I
Hmm.
lived in Israel in the second Intifada back in 2004 before I met Yana, and went through a suicide bombing myself, and that was probably the first time even I thought I stopped for a moment, even though I was so pro-Zionist at the time. I couldn't understand why this 18-year-old girl just killed herself to try to kill Jewish people, and it really bothered me.
Mhm.
And it was the first time that I began to question that at that time there, but I didn't question it enough, and that was the problem, or I would have become more pro-Palestinian from the very onset. All I could see is that, okay, they're trying to kill all the Jewish people because this is what's brainwashed into you. Even in the
Hmm.
churches, it's just you're brainwashed to believe God's chosen people. They were under the persecution of the Holocaust. They came back to their homeland. God gave them this land. There was no one living there at the time. Totally false
Yeah,
narrative,
very false.
Betty. I
Hmm.
mean, I was listening recently to uh, uh, his name is Moshe Sharit. He was the second prime minister of Israel, the first president of Israel. His son, I believe his name is Yaakov Sharit, I believe is his first name. He is still living today. He's 99 years old. At 92 years old, he came out and broke his silence, and he's been on multiple interviews since then. Very coherent. He's not, lost with dementia or nothing like that. And now he's 99 years old, but he's been interviewed by many Israeli media. He's also been interviewed by Arabic media. And he came out, and one of the things that he said that just blew me away, he said, when we were living here, he says, my father came to this country here back when it was Palestine before we ever became a state in the early or late 1800s. And he says, I grew up here. And I was a young man at the time when Israel was getting ready to fight for independence. And he says, and I was living in the Negev. He said, we lived in a little small community. And he said, I got to know the people there because I lived among them, the Bedouins. And Bedouins are just such beautiful people. I've known them
Mhm.
myself from living in Israel. And so I really could understand what he meant, like he really became friends with them. He says, but when the time came for the war, he said, we had been spying on them all along. And I think he told me there was, or not me, but he said in the interview, 46,000 Arabs living in Beersheba. All right. Now, Beersheba is a little desert town in the Negev. And at the time, that was really back in years where there wasn't many roads either. But here you got 46,000 Arabic people living in this region of the world. And they're telling us, oh, there was no Arabs in the world there. He was such a minority. And he talked about how we drove them out, we killed them, we slaughtered them. And he said that one friend of mine came to me and he pleaded with me. And he said, I'm too old to go. He says, I need your help. And he says, the tears just streamed down my face. He said, because he was my friend and now I'm his enemy and I'm driving his family and killing his family.
Wow.
He said, this has haunted me my whole life. And he said, that's all we did. He actually stated, he said, Israel is a criminal state. He said, he lives in Tel Aviv. He said, if I wasn't old, I would leave. Most of my family has left and gone to America. He said, I would leave as well if I wasn't an old man because I regret what we did.
Wow.
That's sad. It's really sad. Well,
Mhm.
I find there's so much division over Gaza, but I think it's starting to come out now, the real, um, a lot of people just, I don't think, understood what was going on, and they thought, okay, well, if you support Gaza, that's not good. And that goes back to your evangelical outlook. And I think even your MAGA maybe take on it, where they've really pushed that Israel is the side that you need to take. And there's so much confusion around that. There's so much confusion when it comes
Eddie,
to Israel, Gaza, Jews, the whole thing, I find.
yeah. Let me share something with your listeners on Gaza and on October the 7th, 2023. I have stated, even one time years ago when Naftali Bennett was not had not become prime minister yet, I used to speak to him on Facebook. I even said to him in a post recently, uh, I said, I hold Israel responsible for October the 7th. I personally hold Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, and Smotrich personally responsible for October the 7th. I said, I lived there during the Intifada when we had the slightest thing happen, when the girl blew herself up and the bomb knocked me right off of my feet because I was still close, even though God had directed me away from her, I was still the concussion of the bomb just knocked me right down. And I could not turn around and get back up to where she was because I was going down the sidewalk with her initially. I could not get back to where she was before there were hundreds of military of every sort we have police, IDF soldiers, special forces, Shin Bet, you name it, they were on the scene within seconds. In this country, I could drive from the northern border all the way down to Eilat in about 3.5, 4 hours. If I was at the very northern end of the country, all the way to the south in a car, I could do that within about 4 hours tops. Tel Aviv and the military base there near were the Sderot. Sderot was one of the first main little communities that was struck. I had friends of mine the very same day that it happened that lived in Israel. One of them, an IDF soldier, sending another friend of mine, he says, give this to Steve. He wrote up exactly what had happened. He said, we were told to stand down. He said, we were told this. He said, and it didn't begin at 6 a.m. like people say. It began at like at 4:30 in the morning. We already knew they were already breaching the fences and everything. He also wrote and told me, he said, instead of wrote, he said, I was assigned to the very brigade that was overrun and they were on so many soldiers were killed. He said, I wasn't there when this happened, but I was assigned to that brigade. He said, instead of wrote the community that was close to that brigade there, he said about a month before, a couple of months before, we came in there, we removed the military as their guards. We told them you have to get your own security. He said a month later, about a month before the attack, we came in and we removed all of their weapons out of their armory. We said you cannot have the weapons. He said then, only days before, we tell all of the soldiers that are on the fence there in Gaza, you're to go to the West Bank. We need you in the West Bank. He said every community, not just Sederot, we took their arms from their communities away from them. And then, last of all, 2 days before the attack happened, they went into one of the independent guys that also monitored all the cameras on the fence and they pulled all of his computers out. After the attack, they returned all of his computers. He cried on the news in Israel. I watched the news myself there. He cried on there and said, because they asked him, what would have happened if they had not taken your computers? He said the attack would have never been successful.
Mhm. Yeah. Well,
Even
Hamas is
Jonathan,
funded by Israel.
right,
And
exactly. Jonathan
Mhm.
Pollard, which I do not like Jonathan at all. He is so hateful towards Palestinians. He said, a